Greetings, this is Eugene the Philosopher, the greatest living philosopher after the unfortunate passing of Quentin Robert de Nameland, who has been the greatest living philosopher before me. In this video I wish to discuss the persona or person of Sherlock Holmes, which is obviously a fictional person, and obviously it's one of the most popular fictional persons ever, like fictional characters, with like many other adaptations like fanfics and stuff, and it's really cool actually. So there was actually even like a Soviet TV series adaptation, and the main actor Vasily Livanov, who played Sherlock himself, was actually how do you say it, like commemorated is probably the wrong word. Well, he was awarded with one of the orders of the British Empire, right? So why not? I mean, the USSR was a British colony anyways, and the Russian Federation was, until very recently, a British colony as well. So you get it. But anyway, my favorite depiction of Sherlock Holmes in TV series is Jeremy Brett. I think he's a brilliant actor, even though he actually said that it was kind of a curse that everyone associates him with Sherlock since he played him, because he actually wanted to play some other dramatic roles. It's kind of a shame actually, but I think he's the best Sherlock Holmes, at the moment at least. I think that's the right type, if you know what I mean. But anyway, let me finish this rather long introduction with my own experience with Sherlock Holmes from my personal life. So I've been really fascinated with this character when I was like 11 to 13, roughly. I can't even name the proper age because, well, I was just reading everything I could find back then. And I can't name you exactly when it was. But anyway, so my own experience was that I was so fascinated by all these novels that when I actually learned, almost like by accident, that it's a fictional character, it was such a shock to me. Akin to, you know, like when people say that, you know, your like childhood ends when you learn that Santa is not real or something like that. So Sherlock is my Santa in this sense, right? So I've lost like a significant portion of my like faith in humanity when I learned that Sherlock Holmes is not real. Like, what? Oh no, like it was actually such a downer for me. So yeah, I didn't fully recover from it even now, I think. Like yeah, like I really wish it was a real man, but it was like back then it was like all these childhood fascinations, you might say, like all this almost like quasi fantasy type of thing, right? So we might also talk about like Joseph Bell as being like the prototype of Holmes, or we might talk about the elementary, my dear Watson, not being a real phrase of Sherlock Holmes. It was actually used in a parody from 1901. Blah blah blah, but we won't talk about this. This video is about the method of Sherlock Holmes, right? And what is the method? You might say, aha, I know what you're gonna say, Eugene, like I caught you, right? So because I'm smart, because I actually think that everybody who watches this is smart, and no irony or sarcasm here actually. So you might say that, okay, Sherlock himself, like, I mean, Conan Doyle, you might say, calls this method deductive, right? As is elucidated explicitly, for example, in The Sign of Four from 1890. In like the very first chapter is called something like The Science of Deduction or something like that. And there's like a few paragraphs about it, right? But we, the smart people, again, unironically, no, it's induction and not deduction, right? What is deduction? It's inference from the general to the partial, right? We know the general rule we observe the partial case and we say, okay, it holds here as well. But what is induction? We observe a small part of the whole and we infer towards the whole. But that's exactly what Sherlock does, right? So Sherlock uses induction, so yeah, that's what Eugene the philosopher will tell us here, right? But it's not that simple. It's not what I'm talking about, actually. What I'm talking about, actually, we'll see later. But here I want to make a big caveat, is that what I'm gonna be talking about later, like right next in this video, and pretty much until the end, is not my thoughts, it's not my ideas. It's ideas of, again, Russian philosopher, not philosopher, by the way, Galkovsky. And like, I just enjoyed his different perspective on these things, okay? So, it's not me who's gonna speak from now on, but him. Yet I like these ideas, so I just repeat them almost verbatim. Almost because he writes in Russian. And again, another motivation for me telling you this is because you probably can't read Russian, at least most of you, so you won't learn this from anywhere else, right? So I think it's useful to at least repeat what he says, like literally however he says it, right? Even though I've made some adjustments here and there, obviously. So yeah, so just let's assume it's me speaking, even though now you know it's not me, okay? So let's just proceed as it is. So British writers are known for their love to writing instructions, actually. And what do I mean by that is instructions specifically for gentlemen, if you know what I mean. And what I mean is people with like high level of culture, like some sort of connection to the upper class and some sort of analytical abilities, okay? And it's all being made, I mean, we're talking about British writers doing all that. It's all being made under this literary facade, if you know what I mean. So impenetrable to superficial minds, so to speak, of the masses, so to speak. And again, the books about Sherlock are apparently an example of that. And let me clarify. Again, remember this caveat. So the main element of Sherlock's method, so we're not talking about induction or deduction anymore, we're actually practically examining what he's doing, how he's doing this, and perhaps partially why he's doing this, etc., etc. So the main element of the method is his brother Mycroft, right? Mycroft Holmes, so-called, or brother, if you know what I mean, again. So, who is Mycroft Holmes, actually? We don't actually know. Like, we only know that he holds an extremely high position in the British government, like, so high that, like, basically sometimes his opinion is basically, Her Majesty's opinion, you know, the Queen Victoria or whatever. So yeah, and the books also tell us that Mycroft is actually much smarter than Sherlock, you know? So it's actually kind of important, yeah? So yeah, and by the way, speaking about like connections, I wish to just, again, reference my own video from way back when, called, what was it called? 7 lessons, I think it was 7 lessons from Copernican revolution. Where I talked about how Kepler, Johannes Kepler, whatever, was only able to do what he did because he was friends of the commander of the, like, a very super high official of the Roman Empire, right? Holy Roman Empire, which is really just the Roman Empire. Wallenstein, I think his last name was, I already forgotten, sorry. It was something like that. I think it was Wallenstein. During the 30 Years' War, he was the head of the commander of the army of the Roman Empire. But anyway, so we have kind of the same situation over here, right? So Mycroft gives occasionally secret jobs related to national security, actually, to his brother Sherlock, right? And simultaneously, overall, Mycroft is his patron / benefactor, right? So he actually helps him a lot in a lot of ways. And I would claim, again, see caveat, that it's impossible to do any successful private investigation business without such supervision, without such patronage from someone up above, right? So yeah. So in this case, if you have such help, you can you can make statements like, oh, constable, I just killed this man, so take his fingerprints, bring him to the mortuary, and, give me the results, report the results back to Baker Street, right? It would be impossible without such help from above, if you know what I mean. So yeah. So that was the first element of the method. The second element of the method is Inspector Lestrade, who is actually transcribed. Actually, I'll give a short digression of this sort, as I usually do. In Soviet transcriptions of many specifically English names, but not limited to. The transcription is made really weirdly. You can make a clearer transcription, let's say, transliteration, but it's made almost literally, letter by letter, and obviously letters in Cyrillic mean a bit different than in Latin alphabet, specifically in Russian versus English, let's say. So, for example, in classic Sherlock translations, Dr. Watson is called Watson, even though you can actually pronounce it in Russian as Watson. So it would be much closer to the original, right? And the same goes for Lestrade, who in classical translations is Lestrade. Almost like Lestrade, It's not Lestrade, which in Russian could be Lestrade, for example, which is pretty close. But it's Lestrade, so it's like Lestrade, But it's Lestrade in the original, alright? So I imagine the Soviet version would be Inspector Lestrade, boop. Something like that. So, yeah, so the second element of the method is Inspector Lestrade, who hates Sherlock, but is forced to submit to whatever he requires from him, that is Sherlock from Lestrade, and, for example, he allows participation of Sherlock in various, criminal official police criminal investigations, right? He actually sends police, actual police force on behalf of Sherlock, right? What else he does? Yeah, well, it already kind of shows you that, a call was made from up above to Lestrade. So, he clenches his teeth, but he's forced to do that, alright? He's against it, but he says, okay, I'll do this, okay. I hate this, but like intervening, like, you know, all these American films when there's like local police and like FBI arriving and they have like an argument. Oh, it's our jurisdiction, you know, get the hell away from here. And they say, oh, no, we have a federal order or whatever. It's kind of the same thing, you know, like Lestrade is the local police, like harassed by the, you know, by the crown, etc. So yeah, a call was made by either by the brother Mycroft or the big brother, which is someone else, but it doesn't really matter. But it's worth noting that for some officers, and the books clearly show us this, that Holmes himself is a patron, just in the same way as Mycroft is a patron for Holmes himself, right? For example, Inspector Bradstreet is much more friendly towards Holmes with respect to Lestrade, at least. So it makes you think that maybe Holmes actually, you know, talked to some people up above that, you know, Bradstreet is a good guy, maybe help him out somehow. So yeah, something like that. And speaking about patrons, I appreciate everyone subscribed to me on Patreon. I appreciate everyone donating on PayPal. So keep doing this, please. Remember that this channel is sponsored by you and you only. And yeah, pretty much that's it. So the links are in the description. If you wish to support me, there you go. Yes. The third element of the method, oh, and by the way, okay, I'll talk about this later. The third element of the method of Sherlock are irregulars, various ones, like mostly like homeless young kids, you know, young kids running errands, like spying on people, maybe bringing something, like bringing messages to somebody, like doing all kinds of stuff, really. And like, again, it's almost in every novel there's something like that happening, right? But again, young kids, especially other people's kids, you know, grow fast. You almost don't notice this. So on one occasion, you have a 13-year-old brat named Johnny, you know, who's not a big of a deal. He's probably homeless, completely poor, etc., running errands. But lo and behold, when he's 20 years old, he's already like John Daredevil Smith or something like that, you know. A muscle with like a dozen armed men behind his back supporting him. And he is controlling like homeless shelters and like prostitution and like fencing at London's docks, you know, something like that. And he is like elusive, thanks to Lestrade, who is also in the deal. Again, speaking about how government is actually involved in organized crime. It's always the case. Like, look at mafia, look at any actually prominent case like that. So he's elusive. He is like bold and brave, you know, and he actually might be, why not? And he respects the old man Sherlock, right? Because, well, he helped him out clearly previously, so there's a big connection between them. And again, lo and behold, when he's like 25 to 30 or maybe 35, he's like a well-respectable citizen, John Smith, like you know, a leader of the dock workers union, Disco Elysium. And he's one of the co-founders of the Labour Party, for example, because why not? So that's how things are being done actually everywhere in all the nations of the world, unfortunately. But this is how power works, guys. Yeah. So yeah, and all of this actually shows us why all the criminals, or criminal, probably without air quotes, in Sherlock's novels, confess so easily to him in particular. Well, it's because the logic of the situation that he reveals to them is kind of ironclad, right? And if ironcladness of this logic is not enough, well, there's always a couple of muscles in the neighboring room who can actually apply a hot flat iron logic to the body of these criminals, or suspects at the very least, right? So the confessions would go much faster, if you know what I mean. Yeah. So this was the third component of the method. And some extras, like literally, actually one extra here is Dr. Watson himself, right? So who is Dr. Watson? We actually don't know this, because in most of cases, Watson is the narrator. So obviously he wouldn't, like, as a legit British person, he wouldn't reveal too much about himself. And probably most of what he reveals is untrue. Again, like what we do know, and what actually explains almost everything, is that he is an experienced soldier, with like a doctor's diploma, if we trust him. But do we actually? I don't know. So there's a joke in Russian, and I have to give you some context before I give you the joke. So there's a nation in Chukotka. I'm not sure if it's the term in English. It's a geographical term, Chukotka. It's this very easternmost peninsula, or rather, like, well, yeah, peninsula, but also the area around it. There's Kamchatka, which is kind of hands southwards, but Chukotka is like the other thing that goes actually eastwards. Like if you're looking at me north there, then Chukotka goes there, right, into the Pacific. So and Arctic to the top, to the north. So Chukchi, the nation, like native, kind of like American Indian type of nation of Chukotka. It's Asia, it's not America. But I mean, there's Bering Strait, a pretty narrow one. But anyway, so Chukchi was one of the very few peoples who actually kicked Russian ass when Russians tried to colonize the place, right? And maybe because of that, there is a lot of jokes in Russian with like Chukcha, like a guy from Chukotka, like from these people, is being like the subject of or an object of a joke. The butt of the joke, I guess, is the term in English. So there's a lot of jokes about Chukchas, like how stupid they are. This is the idea, like they are stupid. And these jokes like show how stupid they are. Sometimes they involve puns, actually not that many, but it's basically, yeah. So maybe it's like a revenge, a cultural revenge, but I don't really know. I mean, there's so much mythology around all of this. Anyway, what I wanted to tell you is the joke, this kind of Chukcha joke. So there's a joke that an autopsy has shown that Chukcha died from autopsy. So it's like, you know, Chukcha was so stupid that he wasn't even dead, but he was autopsied, and then he died because of it, you know. So something like that. I mean, it's kind of silly when you try to explain it, but yeah, something like that. So autopsy has shown that the guy died from autopsy is Dr. Watson's method, if you know what I mean. So Dr. Watson is actually like a very shady character, probably. So anyway, let's it's kind of like what I said about like Constable, I just killed this man, like please remove him from here. By Sherlock, so it's like mirrored by Dr. Watson saying, okay, this guy choked himself to death even though he has like 20 knife wounds around the heart, totally not in the same shape as my knife. What are you gonna do? Like, make an autopsy. So this is what I'm talking about, essentially. Right. So this is like probably the end of this big segment. So this, what I've described above, is the real Sherlock Holmes's method. But if you're not a gentleman, and I certainly am not myself, you would be fascinated by knowing how Sherlock is able to track the perp by having an erudition about 1 million types of tobacco ash, right? I mean, you know what I mean if you're in any way familiar with the books, right? Or like adaptations. So yeah, one other thing I would like to note, this is already myself, it's not covered by the caveat that I've given at the beginning. So there are plenty of really good games about Sherlock Holmes, and I specifically want to recommend one series. The series is called Sherlock Holmes, but obviously it's really hard to find with this kind of name. So I'm gonna recommend you one specific game from this series, from which you will be able to find the whole series, if you wish, of course. But it's really good. It's really, really good. I really recommend this. Like this specific game and the neighboring games, so to speak, from the same series. So the game is called Sherlock Holmes, The Case of Silver Earring. So if you're interested to spend like a couple of days like scratching your head, look it up. I mean, it's really well done. Like, yeah. Yes. Okay. Now I'm thinking of making a Patreon short, like Patreon exclusive short about Ukrainian situation. I'm recording this on March 10th, actually March 9th, but after midnight, so it's technically March 10th. And I probably will, because this video was actually shorter than I thought, and I'm grateful for that. Like, good old me, thank you. I thank myself for that. So okay, I'll probably record the short about Ukraine. Not sure how short it would be, because there's a lot to talk about. But the main point you could actually see, if you don't want to subscribe to me on Patreon to see this exclusive, just look at my Facebook notes. Again, if you're my friend on Facebook. If you're not, then, well, I don't know what to tell you. Maybe I will repeat the point sometime later. Yeah. All right. Thank you for watching. The eons are closing.